Welcome back to the Boardroom. This is a podcast series entitled Transparent Conversations. It's your opportunity to call in with any question that you have whatsoever about the association, or you can call in with a question of our business administrator in residence, who you'll meet with just in a few minutes. But transparency for us is not just a buzzword. It's a fundamental core value of our association. And we believe that when we're transparent with our leadership and our happenings and priorities here, it makes for a better community of stakeholders. So this is your chance. This is the Boardroom, your opportunity to call in. And actually, I'm going to give you the phone number right now. It should appear on your screen as well. 609-278-5292. We hope you call in with a question for us today. Let me begin. Charlie, for our viewers, love to have you introduce yourself.
Sure.
What you do and how it relates to the work that we do. And please don't make fun of the suit.
I won't. I won't. I think it's very attractive.
This was a gift with love. I emphasize with love from two of the members of our board of directors, actually, one of my officers.
And I'll just bring your attention to my red tie.
That is impressive.
I'll tell you.
I have a feeling that your wife assisted you with that process or encouraged its purchase.
No, she made me buy it.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks to Barry Fitzgerald and Barry Walker, I am sporting my new suit. Somebody said, well, you look like a joke. How could you go on the air with that? I said, no. This demonstrates that we have fun. We balance fun and work. Important for you to see, and we're being transparent with. Anyway, Charlie Muller, great to have you on the show.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Charlie Muller. I've been with the school boards here for 4 months. Just a little of my background. I spent the first 15 years after college in the casino industry and then moved into education.
Tell them a little bit more about that. That's fascinating. Listen to this one.
I started as a midnight to 8 auditor at Resorts International 2 weeks before they opened. And it was interesting on those midnight to 8 shifts, if you know much about Atlantic City, they were lined out the doors to the boardwalk and a couple blocks in either direction. It was just extremely busy and very, very interesting. Then buses came, so I started running buses for the casinos. Came from all over New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Delaware, Pennsylvania. So we had charters, and I actually had to work the Superstar Theater for a period of time to help out.
Did you act?
I did act.
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't act. No. And then I started running more buses and got involved in some other things. In 1990, I thought I had enough of the casino industry, so I went back to school for my certification as a school business administrator. So I started in Upseekin in 1992, a couple other districts, regional high schools, another K-8. And then I moved into the Department of Education right around 2004, where I stayed till 2010, and went back for my final district, which was Greater Egg Harbor Regional, down where I live. And then I retired in 2014 and went back to the department in 2014 for 10 years, where I was the executive county business official for 3 or 4 counties, and most recently the Ocean County Superintendent of Schools in Ocean County. And then had an opportunity to come to New Jersey school boards, which I look forward to it. Like I said, it's my fourth month, and I'm looking to share my experiences and my research with board members, school districts, superintendents, BAs, whoever would like to have some assistance. I'm here.
And this is a new position that we added at New Jersey School Boards Association for all of you, for our members, and opportunities related to the budget, related to finances. Here we have a local expert that can answer your questions or guide you in the right direction. So pleasure to have you as part of our NJSBA family. Good to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
I mean, this is our Valentine's Day special, so which happens to fall in the middle of February. And speaking of February, we're in the middle of a time where we get state aids released at the end of the month. So at this point, what should our school districts be looking for? As they're in the middle of the budget process for 24-25, what should they be thinking about at this point?
Well, at this point in time, I think we need to mention that your budgets are probably 90% fixed in nature between salaries, benefits, heat, light, and power, tuitions, transportation. Most of these numbers are known. There's tuitions out there for private schools. Once the budget software is complete, they'll be able to do the tuition for send and receive relationships. Transportation is always interesting. Transportation costs have risen pretty dramatically over the past, few years. And in addition to that, we have a shortage of bus drivers, not only here in the state of Jersey, but countrywide.
That's right.
So it's difficult to add any routes. They become more and more expensive. What districts are doing, we have a consortium. When I was at Greater Egg Harbor Regional, Michelle was our transportation person.
Okay.
And she developed a consortium other than the routes that we had to provide. We've had enough routes, so if somebody needed a route going somewhere just for one student, most of the times we're able to accommodate them. So that helps with consortium. It keeps the cost down for both districts.
For sharing services between the two districts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. The appropriations and salaries are pretty much done unless you're in the middle of negotiations. So you make your best guess at that point in time. But a lot of the appropriations tend to trend over a period of time.
Yeah.
Look at your class size, but I think the most important thing before all this begins is you need to look at what the district priorities are for New Jersey's standards. And what do you want to do? It's not always based on dollars first. It's what are the priorities and what are the goals of the district? So if we want to, for example, class size, we want to maintain class size at a certain level. So that's one of your priorities. When all the state aid and everything gets in final, you'll be able to see if you can maintain that class size that the board would like to do.
Yeah.
So and then once the second download after the state aid comes in, then you'll have a full picture of what the budgets are. But right now, you can do your appropriations. There's a couple adjustments that you could probably be able to do.
Okay.
All your adequacy and all your local fair share doesn't happen until after the second download of the budget.
Right.
And I think we're going to put up a link to the Department of Education's budget guidelines. There's 258 pages in the guidelines, but they're excellent. They've had a person in finance that's been doing it for years, and she's very, very good at updating all the information. So if whatever topic you have, you could just go into these budget guidelines, search for it, and it'll pop up and give you the detailed information of where the numbers come from, what we need to input.
That's great. Yeah. Excellent.
Yep.
And I remember those days of setting priorities as a former superintendent of schools. It was interesting walking through that process because my finance committee would do a survey. So we'd look at our priorities and make sure, because it's important to listen to your stakeholders. But I know inherent within our priorities, we always had instructional priorities, right? So some years it depended, right? So one year might have been focused on ESL, expansion of a program, maybe new mathematics program. Certainly always those related to our buildings and grounds or finance. So if we had new turf fields or if we were installing new energy efficient, lighting, those are things that guide you. But how do you maintain that balance? I think was always the challenge for me as a superintendent, certainly a challenge for my business administrator and our finance committee was how do you maintain that balance between, our taxpayers, the trust of our taxpayers, and how do we continue to provide the optimal programs? So it's that that fine balance. And right now it seems like we're almost heading into a time where we need to be concerned. We're bracing for impact financially with, as you mentioned, inflation, transportation costs, eventually losing, federal funding. All of this will be hitting us, with our current structures in place of the tax levy. So it's interesting and such an important and timely topic. I know it's not easy being a business administrator and going through this and working with your finance committee. Any advice that you'd offer our board members, who are working or maybe they're serving on a finance committee?
Sure. I forgot to mention, I did teach budgeting and planning at Stockton University for over 20 years. And the most important thing that I ever taught was the planning process. Your budget just isn't numbers.
Yeah.
It's what you want to do. And you mentioned facilities. Facilities sometimes is the first to go. But if you look at your home and you have a leaky window and you throw a little bit of caulk in and say, that'll be okay, we'll fix it later.
Yeah.
That $200 window in years to come is going to cost you a couple $1,000s if you don't take care of it. So facilities are very important to take care of.
I see a lot of districts struggling in that area.
Yeah.
Where they, due to, lack of funding, where do they cut? And a lot of times they may cut in areas such as maintenance, buildings and grounds, which at the end of the day, eventually will lead them and potentially going out for a referendum rather than taking care of their buildings.
Yeah, districts do a comprehensive maintenance plan, and it's a 3-year plan. What you've done, and there's 40 indicators that you can find on the school facilities website. And there's required maintenance, capital maintenance, and just regular maintenance. And there's maintenance reserve. If districts are fortunate enough to have money in a reserve, they can pull that each year for the required maintenance. But it gives you a plan that you're supposed to have. And planning is the most important. To me, planning is the most important. And it never stops.
That's right.
A lot of us at times, as soon as the budget's done, it's voted on and approved. However, it's done by an April election or November. You just wipe your brow and say, yeah, we'll worry about this again next year, but next year comes the next day.
Yeah.
And
Right.
what we need to keep in mind is if you're having an April or November election, your budgets don't really begin until July, but really in September when all the staff comes back and your building's open, fully. And things could happen. You could have a person that gets sick, so you'd have to hire a substitute, which are also difficult to find. So at this point in time, you deal and you plan with what you know.
Yeah.
You know what your state aid was last year? Consider it. I would always take it as flat. I know my appropriations because of salary guides and everything moving up. And there's a good document. It's called a position control roster.
Yeah, talk about the position control roster.
The position control roster supposedly, well, it doesn't supposedly, code has 23 items. And there's no software in the state that can cover 23 items. So a few years ago, well, quite a few years ago at this point in time, it's probably 12, we were doing QSAC. And we met with the person that does QSAC. We said, listen, we can't do this. This information is on probably 3 or 4 separate sheets, but all the information is there in the business office.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. So what we did is the most important thing, and I have it here somewhere, but let's see if I can do it by memory.
Yeah.
The position control roster is designed to have a position control number for each position. So if you have 3 kindergarten teachers, you should have 3 position controls for that position. Also, where are they located, what schools?
Right.
Their salary is important. When they started, where their step is, if there's any additional monies out there. So there's really 2 parts to this. The part is the salaries that where people, you move them up a step, wherever they're going to be. That's going to be their salaries. That's going to be the base.
Yeah.
The second part is more trends and history. And it's any overtime, any additional stipends for covering another class, substitutes, anything else that would go in there has to be recorded. Because when the county office reviews a budget, they'll take a line that says, let's say grades 1 through 5. And there'll be a number, a total number. And that has to match what's in the budget. It has to match the position control roster. Sometimes if you forget a substitute or overtime, especially when it comes to custodial areas, it won't match. So part of the review is to make sure that matches. Because if your budget has $500,000 and your position control roster only has $450,000,
Right.
then you have $50,000 or vice versa. You don't want to be short. So that's part of the review that we do.
Yeah.
But it's very important because also trends where teachers are, what positions become open. illnesses, so on and so on. So it's a very, very good document.
It's like almost the guiding principle of the business office.
Yes.
And having to create a new position in the position control roster before you hire for that, individual, right? So you've got to create it.
Yes.
Or maybe abolish one and create another one. But that document seems to inform a lot of budget decisions and can assist them in budget planning.
Yes.
It certainly does, I'm sure. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Which leads in health benefits. Let's talk a little bit about health benefits, which are
Wow.
a little.
That should be a whole
expensive.
podcast. I don't think we have enough time
could
for our
be.
viewers to talk about health benefits.
Tell you what,
But would love to hear a little bit, yeah.
one of the
Thoughts
things
on
I
that?
thoroughly enjoyed was going through.
And sorry, I keep checking to see if anybody's logging in and asking questions, so that's why I'm flipping back and forth.
Well,
Go
if they
ahead.
ask questions, I hope they're
Yeah.
not hard ones.
Hey, you never know. They heard you were on the air. They're like, we got to call in with some difficult questions here.
Right.
We're having issues with Facebook and Instagram.
So if you're on,
Live
well, they can't hear me, but for those of you who are online, we are having trouble with Facebook and Instagram. We're trying to get that up and running for you, but thanks for tuning in. And for those who are on those platforms may not be able to hear me, but you can always watch this later on as well. We'll certainly replay this for you. But yeah, go ahead. Health benefits.
Yeah, health
Good topic.
benefits.
By the way, do we have any callers? No callers.
No
Okay.
call.
Keep going, Charlie. There you go.
The health benefits, but did a lot of research. And actually, I have to be honest with you, in preparing for this podcast, I did a lot of research, a lot of reading. I actually had a good time.
You had a good time.
I had a good time looking at all this stuff.
Charlie has fun with this.
The health benefits. I did a quick little calculation.
Yeah.
And for a single PPO, which is a maintenance health organization, used to be when I very first heard of it, the lowest cost could be $11,000. To go to the more expensive one, which is New Jersey Direct 10, I believe was the most expensive. That plan is $44,000. So again, I mentioned earlier that things could happen. People could come back, got married over the summertime. Now they're eligible for husband and wife.
Right.
They could have a baby. Now they have family. So these things can add up. But again, we're now in February.
All things that we can, encourage them doing, but at the same time, we'll add up. Yeah.
So you need to plan, and there's trends to that you can use in preparing the budget.
Just a reminder of viewers at home, if you'd like to call in, if you can hear us and you can't maybe see the screen, it's 609-278-5292. Fire away any question you'd like for Charlie or myself. We'd love to answer your questions. All right, you want to continue with health benefits or you want to move on to something else? Because I was thinking debt service payments is another one to
Debt
consider.
service payments. This is probably the easiest of all.
All right, see, I gave you a softball.
All the budgeting line items you have. Your debt service is just paying back your bonds, and it's usually for major construction areas. What a lot of districts do as your debt starts to expire, sometimes they roll it over. So you can upgrade your facilities and keep the money going. Same thing with maintenance, same thing with some capital money. You roll it over because it's pretty much the same dollar amount going forward. So you can actually maintain your facilities. The most important thing is to make sure you file your debt service aid in December. Yeah, because if you tend to miss that, you're going to have a hard time trying to get any debt service aid. And the minimum, I believe, is 40% aid.
Okay.
Depending on the district, you can go higher. Depending on the factor group of the district.
You talked a little bit about transportation earlier. And we have districts that have send-receive relationships. Any thoughts about that, or what are they? I certainly know the answer, but I'd love for you to discuss for our viewers. When do they have to provide the transportation, and what does that look like? And go through a few scenarios for our listeners.
All right, we'll talk basically what they call to and from.
Okay.
To and from is 2 miles for elementary schools, 2.5 miles for high schools. You're allowed to have a student walk that far. And the mileage is measured from door to door during the shortest walkway or pathway. It's not necessarily roadways.
What about a child with an individualized education program?
That's most likely going to be in their IEP, what type of transportation.
Okay.
They may have door-to-door transportation, pick them up at the house, or they may be able to ride on a regular to and from bus.
Mhm.
So it depends on how the child study team writes their IEP.
Okay.
Charter schools, it's pretty much the same as to and from
Mhm.
for the regular public school students. The difference there is you have to offer the parent. I think it's $1,180, I think it was.
Wow.
Is the aid in lieu of payment for non-public students.
Okay.
That's a base. So if the charter school's coming, if the charter school cost is more than that, then you have to offer the parents the opportunity to pay the difference.
Ah.
Now, as crazy as it seems, it happened to me once. I had one student and I had to provide the transportation. This goes way back into the 90s. And I sent the parent a letter saying, do you want to pay $20,000 for transportation? Obviously, I got a response as well.
Shocker.
Yeah, really. Yeah, so that's, and the
Yeah.
same thing with aid in lieu of. Aid in lieu of is for non-public students,
Mm.
for the most part. And
What's the amount for aid in lieu for 23-24, just for our viewers at home?
I wrote that down, Tim, and $1,165.
Nice.
Excuse me. And then there's just other transportation, preschool transportation. You have, and transportation is becoming just more and more expensive, not only short as a driver, but the placements.
Yeah, talk a little bit about out-of-district placements
Yes.
or out-of-district tuitions.
Sure.
Let's start with that, if you don't mind.
No. The out of district, and I have some notes here on that.
Yeah.
There is, now these are out of district private school placements. I have 135, I've counted 135 approved private schools throughout the state. They'll range,
So districts will select from the approved list
the child study team will place the best,
from the approved
correct,
list.
from the approved list. They go from 180 days to 226 days. Obviously, the 226 is a little more than the extended school year.
Right.
Extended school year is usually 220. And the price will range from $224 a day for 180 days, all the way up to $745 a day.
A day.
Wow. For extended school year.
Hmm.
Now, on top of the tuition, it depends on the school if they're going to provide the itinerant services or if they're going to provide aids, whatever is needed. If not, that comes back to the district would be responsible for that, plus transportation.
Wow.
So kids could be on the, bus for over an hour to get to some of the schools.
And that's a loss right there.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and having children travel so far, when they could be doing something else.
Especially
Yeah.
children with disabilities.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it any more
Most vulnerable.
difficult.
Sure. We talked a little bit about send receive, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on send receive tuition. Any
Sure.
thoughts on that?
Yep, there's two calculations, A41 and A42, which is a manual calculation in Excel. Very few, I think there's maybe a handful of districts that use that in the state. There used to be that few.
Okay.
The budget software will calculate tuitions. It'll calculate it by kindergarten, grades 1 through 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12, and various special ed categories.
Right. Okay.
So they'll take all of your budget numbers.
Yep.
And they'll run through the calculation, and you'll get a rate for each one of those programs.
Oh, okay.
So that is for in-district only. That's not the private school, it's completely separate. The law says that you can charge less than that, but you cannot charge more.
More.
So if your tuition is $15,000, you can't charge $15,000 and $1. $15,001.
Gotcha.
You can charge under that. And
That's
then
a way
every
of
2 years.
regulating it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then every 2 years, they adjust the tuition. So if you paid 15 and it was only 14, you get the money back. And
Gotcha.
again, there's a calculation for that to get that money back.
What about like a formal send receive agreement between two districts?
There is there's a formal agreement that's in there. As a matter of fact, I looked at it, and there's one for regular education.
Yeah.
And I believe there's one for special education. So it's just agreement, the number of students. One of the things you need to put in, there's a section for comments. You need to put something in there for resource room if somebody's going to charge resource room in the future.
Oh.
And again, there's a calculation for that in there. But everything should be in that contract so everybody knows what's going on, including the adjustments from 2 years prior.
Wow.
It's much easier using the software.
Yeah.
Don't try and
Sure.
think it's much easier.
Don't do it on your own.
Yeah.
Don't do it on your own. So we're at midpoint, and I think just knowing you, I'm sure some sort of joke has been brewing. You always have a good joke. We're at midpoint in the program. I
Okay.
could just do a little break here and give our listeners one of the Charlie classics.
Okay.
You could choose any of them.
Well,
You know, I know you're filled.
can't choose any of them.
Okay.
Well, we can choose a couple.
All right, go ahead.
This is
let's hear
this is
one.
good because this actually came close to happening to me.
Really?
Playing golf in North Carolina years ago. Yeah. So these three guys were.
Did you
playing
wait?
golf.
Did you play that for them?
Huh?
Did you play on the school team?
No.
Oh,
I
you're
played
just
ba-
playing,
I was a
okay.
baseball guy.
Oh, yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
No golf.
No.
So these three guys finished golf, and they go to the car, and one guy who's the driver locks the car, and he goes, "Oh, I locked the car. I can't get in."
Yeah.
So the second guy says, "Well, listen." He says, we got to find someone. Maybe have a coat hanger. We can, if he goes, now we can't do that in these new cars. We can do it in the old ones. We can't do it now. Third guy looks at them all and says, listen, we better do something because the top down car is starting to rain. And we'll save the other ones.
Yeah, that's good. Love it. Thanks for the intermission.
You're welcome.
Enjoyable, as always. All right, let's move on to, if you don't mind, the topic of, I just want to check and see if there's any questions. Topic of facilities. Talk to our viewers a little bit about, long-range facility plans, planning for facilities. We talked a little bit about it in the beginning with budget prep, but can you dive in a little bit, deeper into
Sure.
facilities?
Sure. And recently, this really helped. When you had all the additional facilities money coming in, districts had to up
Now, talk about that. Do you mean regular operating district grants?
regular operating
Okay,
district
got it.
grants.
Explain that just for our viewers.
Yeah, there's ROD stands for regular operating districts. There's money that was put out by the state. I think it was 75 million. There was different tranches of money that came out. There was a lot of money that came out. Part of those requirements were you had to update your long-range facility plan. Now, your long-range facility plan is the footprint of each one of your buildings. It's the square footage. It's how many kids are in the room, where they are, how many libraries, how many kindergarten classes. It's a complete inventory of your building.
Mm.
So when you need to apply for when you submit your application for a building project that has to be approved by school facilities, then all this information has to come out. And then they'll review your facilities and say, yeah, it's okay to go ahead and do this, especially when you expand your facilities. Because if you have unhoused students and there's plenty of room,
Right.
why are you putting an addition on unless you're
what's
putting
the
on a
point?
gym or something? of that
Helps you have
nature.
intentionality and thought.
Yep.
I'm going to pause this conversation because we do have a caller. So we've got a live caller. If you can.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
you're on the air. Can I ask who's calling?
Hi. Irene.
Irene,
From-
thanks for joining us. Irene actually is our immediate past president.
Yes.
And I'm sure she is loaded with questions. So fire away, Irene. Thanks for calling in today.
All right. So I got permission for 2, but I got 3. How's that? So the first one is you talked about process of involving, making sure everybody was involved in the process of building the budget. has been my experience that the finance committee becomes the budget committee in many districts. What kind of suggestions do you have for involving the rest of the board in the process, so that at the end of the time, when the budget comes up for, final approval by the board, everybody on the board feels like they've had a voice?
Yeah, great question, Irene. How do you
Yeah,
you have board members that may feel out of the loop, they
Sure.
haven't been part of the conversations? Any
Well,
recommendations?
Other than the budget, Irene, they have district goals. District
Right.
goals, I believe, are set by the entire board. So
Yes.
those district goals should be part of the budgeting process. So that they should feel included if they had participated in that particular
Development of the goals.
development of the goals. Also, your superintendent has goals.
Hmm.
Does the superintendent, and again, the full board agrees on the superintendent goals. And they could become part of the budget, probably should be, at least some of them.
So when you're going through the development process, you need to really align those instructional priorities that are developed by the full board and include the superintendent's goals as part of the foundation of the process, correct?
Yep, and also part of the budget documentation is district priorities and New Jersey learning standards. They're in there too, and also there's a checklist, Irene, I'm sorry to cut you off, but there's also a checklist that you can find on the department's website, and it is I think it might be D2, the priorities of the district that's reviewed by the county office. So that gives you an indication of what they should do, but I think they may be included, but not really.
And then if I could just add my 2 cents, great question, Irene. I think communication is really important. Here we are hosting a podcast on transparency. So I just putting myself in, looking through the lens of a board member that's not part of the committee, properly communicating out and regularly using those board reporting periods, when you have the committee reports, as an opportunity, not only just to give information, because I think too often in life we give, right? We give, and we don't necessarily listen intently, listening to understand rather than to respond, which I know my assistant always uses that verbiage. So that's just my 2 cents, is making sure that it's transparent in the process. And that benefits not only the other board members, but
Sure.
all stakeholders, right? Yeah. You had a second question, Irene.
Yes, you were talking about the roster of staff and making sure that you account for everyone. How about if you're thinking about adding additional staff? How would that work out with that roster? Do we have to put that in ahead of time, or is that something that happens after the fact, or what?
No, you put it in. You would put it in now, and if it was, let's say it's grades 1 through 5, because that's what I happen to be looking at right now, you would just add a line and say vacant.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and then and then Irene, what'll happen is there's one column, the employee, the date the position was created. You would definitely want to fill that in, so that'll be February 14th, 2024.
Yeah, great.
Gotcha.
Great point.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good, helpful. All right, then I've got one for you for later on in your conversation, because it's not directly budget related, but could be in the future. If a district is considering moving their election back to April from November, the costs involved in running that election, some portion of that or all of that has to be borne by the district. How does the district gather that information, and where is that accounted for in the budget process for the upcoming year in which that might happen? So you don't have to answer that right now, but that's just if you get time for it, there's someplace in the conversation. There are a number of districts that are starting to toss that idea around.
Your Board of Elections will be able to help you with that, because you have the printing of the ballots, you have the machine rental, you have, I don't know whether you'll have facility rentals, but the election board should be able to help you with that, the County Board of Elections.
Yeah.
Okay. And then that number goes into our budget as an expense, right?
It does go in your budget as expense, yes.
Okay, so moving it back to April is not without some cost to the district, because it's whatever the difference is between what it costs us to participate in the November election, what it costs us to participate in an April election.
Correct, because you may have board members that are up, and you also have to certify a tax levy.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Hey,
Look.
Irene, thanks for calling in. And we hope
No
you call
problem.
in next month as well with a question. So
All right, I'll
to
be
have you on
around.
the air.
I'm not going to-
thank you.
Okay.
We actually, Charlie, we have another question that came through on social media.
Uh-oh.
And this one's from a board member who works with Committee of the Whole.
Ah,
And I'm not sure what your experience is with that.
I've
But
had both.
you work with both. So the question here is, when do board members traditionally get involved in the budget process without, basically as a member of Committee of the Whole? And what does that involvement look like for them?
well, it'll range from district to district, but I'll tell you my experience with committee as a whole.
Mm.
We usually start in late fall to get some serious, like November, December. You'll have a good enrollment after all your council reports are due
Yep.
in April and in October. So you'll know what your enrollment's going to be, what the projected enrollment's going to be, your grants. It's a lot of things that'll happen. And then you start discussing what you want to do. Again, I'm going to go back to the planning.
Mhm.
What is your plan? And that's the discussions that should start occurring early enough in the year. Do we want to maintain, let's say 23 is a class size. Do we want 23? Do
Yeah.
we want 20? Can we go to 26? What do we want to do? And that's a discussion point in that time. The money will come later, but the money is there for the most part.
And from what I've seen with Committee of the Whole, just to add my thoughts as well, is that the process should be the same.
Yes.
So timing wise, rather than operating as a committee that's solely responsible for finance, which is a segment of your board, operating as Committee of the Whole means that you're all that committee for that particular meeting. So the process in terms of when you start to have these conversations to budget development all the way through should be the same timeline, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So just advice to that board member, you should start to see things. If you're a first-year board member, you'll start to see information coming out now and meeting as a Committee of the Whole, without a doubt.
Yep.
Yeah. And certainly after state aid numbers are revealed later this month.
Yep.
Great question.
Mary from Ridgewood.
And we've got another caller, Mary from Ridgewood. You're live.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Great to have you on the air.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. I'm a brand new board member.
Well, welcome to the board.
so
Thank you for your service.
I'm thrilled. I'm really excited about it. So I have kind of a question, which is, we know that there's teacher shortages. We know that there are, bus driver shortages. We know that generally there's inflation, so that the cost of everything that we need to do is going up, which isn't new, but it's becoming more acute. We also know that, when that financial aid that we had kind of from the federal government, we kind of had an infusion of that. We're facing the financial cliff. We also know that we have a 2% cap on our budgets. And in my district, we, adhere strictly to that as much as we have always. And so my question is, against that backdrop, knowing that in the next, 5 years or so, we have some fairly large facility needs that are, some degree could become somewhat aspirational, but really are a necessity, I think, for the changing needs of the community, and also just educational needs. We've got AI, which, is going to require a lot of, professional development. We've got, we want to make sure that our DEI and our, SEL learning is, as it should be. And of course, the changing needs always of the special education community, and just, the ability to innovate, right? And to continue to be as good as we can be. Clearly, those appear to be competing because everything costs money. And my question is, any advice for how we plan for those things over the next, 3 to 5 years, just generally, based on your experience?
Yeah, great call. Thank you, Mary, for calling in. That's a great question. Charlie, I don't know if you want to give a first crack and then I'll respond.
Sure.
Up to you.
When I was at Stockton many years ago, I didn't believe in a 5-year plan. It's far out. It's 5 years. I was going for anywhere from a year and a half to maybe 2, possibly 3 years. And you could probably do 3 years in this particular industry. So again, you would look at.
Because of the volatility.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So you would look at, and what I used to do is I would look at any trends. So I would look at my history, and I would look at attrition. How many teachers are retiring?
Yeah.
Am I going to save money there? What can I do to curtail some of my transportation costs? Can I tier the bus one more time? Do I change my school starting times so I can run another section of the bus?
Yep.
And save some money there.
It's and I think Mary's question is a question that all boards are struggling with right now, and that's one of the reasons why it's great to belong to an association like the New Jersey School Boards Association, because we have a team of our governmental relations team has been advocating for additional relief or flexibilities that provide districts opportunities to bring in some additional funding. Or looking at, you could always go to a second question. We could talk a little bit about that, but I wanted to mention a few things that I am concerned with personally related to Mary's question. The first is those districts that used federal funding or one-time revenue sources, or even like a 3-year source for staff and for programs, because that is most concerning to me. And I expressed this personally with our governor, that all these wonderful programs that districts have brought in, as a result of the pandemic, with the mental health, all of these that we really need in our districts, very creative, innovative programs. What's going to happen to them when, as Mary said, we're hitting the fiscal cliff? We've got inflation, we've got issues with transportation, rising costs. We've got a shortage of staff. We want to pay them properly, what they should be paid. All of these factors. And what about the great innovative programs that we brought in? Those are going to be the ones that will suffer. That's where we're going to cut costs. And that's unfortunate. So as we brace for impact, what are things that districts can do? And I think you are starting to lay out some ideas of how they can forecast, to provide for their students, and creative revenue sourcing, looking for areas of shared services, both with the municipality, also with other districts in terms of transportation, are two unique ideas. But we are still going to need some sort of relief for our districts as we hit this fiscal cliff.
And Mary, we've been, when I review budgets,
At the county level, tell them again.
I'm sorry.
Remind them, this is good.
From the county level, working for the Department of Education, I would review budgets on a one-on-one.
Let me stop, because I think it's important. So our each of the counties have an executive county superintendent that meets with the districts about their budget through the approval process. So now go ahead, just in case our viewers didn't know.
Yeah, there's and I would always ask the districts to come in so I could sit with them and talk to them about their budget. The first question I would ask them is, are you reducing any programs for next year? And depending on what the answer is, then we would have one discussion. I would also ask, on the positive side, are you increasing any programs? And that would have another discussion. But through the budgeting process, and we're going to, for example, if I was doing it this year, I'd ask, all right, here's your 24-25 budget, what's going on? But next question is, what are you going to do for 25-26? Because there's areas in there, there's surplus that's used, there's revenues that may be short from one year to the next, and there's a whole list of them. So I would ask, how does it affect 25-26? So the question for long-term 5 years, I'm looking at 2. It would be 3 if I included the 23-24 budget. But that's what I would ask, where are you going to be? Because if you have to cut staff for whatever reason for 24-25, are you going to have to cut staff again in 25-26?
Right.
So that leads to other discussions. Again, I keep going back to class size, go back to tiering of your buses, which means you run your bus multiple times during the course of the day. So those are the questions that I would ask. And depending on the answers is where you would begin to plan out your next couple of years.
And driving factors related to that, obviously are your collective bargaining agreements,
Correct.
which are a large portion, but and those are coming at higher than your year over year levy. But at the same time, you want to pay your staff, in a time of a shortage. So there's all these dynamics that come into, play when you're trying to develop a budget.
And there's one other meeting that we have with school districts, and that is the mid-year budget review that happens in December, early January. And it's basically, and there's a link, it's called the TG, Taxpayers Guide for Educational Spending. That'll tell you how your school district compares within the state on various items. I think there's 19 of them. But again, that's another opportunity to talk about how your district's doing. What is your increase? What is your salary increase, like Tim mentioned? Is it on the rise? Is it 3.2? Is it going through wherever it's going to be? And what are some of the issues you have? So that comes out at that point in time, which all those issues should just roll in to your planning for your budget for next year or the year after.
Stephen Covey once said, you begin with the end in mind. And I think during these times of budget development, it's so important to look through the lens of, let's start with, what we can't move, right? And then look for creative areas that we can apply for grants, look for funding, look for partnerships, look for shared services in those other areas. But I think really budget development needs to start with, what do we need? What are the bare bones here that we need to sustain our programs, certainly personnel, and services for children without compromise? And unfortunately, I think, inherent within Mary's question and many of our board members is the notion of, they do feel like they have to make compromise now.
Right.
So,
And this time of year, you always hear the conversation of zero-based budget.
yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Zero-based budget is a concept where you tear everything down, you start from scratch. I've always taught a modified zero-based budget where you start with what you have and go forward.
Yeah. Okay.
So
What do you mean what you have?
So let's say, I use class size as an example. Let's say you have 5 grade 1 through 5 teachers and your class size is 15. Well, that's where you are now. Going forward, do you move to 4 teachers and increase that 18 or 19? So that's a modified, because you can't, to go back and say, listen, we're not going to have any grade 1 through 5 teachers. You have to have them.
Right.
So it's better to start from where you are now and then work either backwards or forwards, depending on what you have.
Yeah. We've actually got another caller. Great question, Mary. Thank you. We have a caller, John Fayford, is on the line. John, welcome to the show.
Yes. Hi, Tim. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, John.
Hello. Quick question for Charlie, and I apologize if you've already addressed this. I jumped on the podcast a little late, but my question is there any end in sight for healthcare costs rising at such high rates? And if not, then how do you continue to deal with that from a budgeting perspective year after year?
Well, for school districts, they do get a little bit of break with the healthcare adjustment. Healthcare used to increase at a very small rate. This year it was, I think the state health benefits is 6.3%. You're allowed a 2% increase. So districts right now will be able to get a 4.3% increase on their increase in healthcare costs. Now, healthcare costs is limited to major medical and prescription, and that's in the budget software. The longer teachers teach, the longer we continue to live. Your healthcare costs are going to be there, and I don't see them going down as we get older. And teachers, I think now are in there to 60 into their 60s now, when a lot of us used to retire at 55. So they're in the profession longer, which means their health insurance is going to continue on. So other than that healthcare adjustment, that's all I know at this point in time. But you should periodically shop it.
I'm going to throw up a article that was released back in, this is October of 23, so maybe it's a little bit dated, but each year around October, we'll get notification of anticipated, rise in healthcare Aon in particular with this article, but it's it's really difficult to be able to budget for those increases, and especially I think now more than ever with all the constraints that we have at the local level. So yeah.
And the cost. I was many years ago. I had a topographical appointment.
Where are we going with this one?
Oh, not too far. But they charged me $40.
Huh.
And I said, well, that's a lot because I'm not used to paying that much. And when they showed me the price of the actual prescription, it was $2,500. So how I paid $40 and somebody else paid $2,100.
Yeah.
So John, I think that's where some of the costs are. And the more and more you have new medications coming out, it's you're going to pay for it.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks for your call. Appreciate it. No questions. Let's move on. We have time for a couple more topics. One of them that I thought was interesting that we had not covered is the Department of Education review process for budgets. I think this would be interesting for our viewers to understand, the process. And I know you have a bunch of appendices that you refer to. But if you could talk a little bit about that, I think that'd be interesting for our board members who may not know.
Yeah, if you again, we're going to be able to post the website. We're going to post the finance website.
Can you pull it up now while we're on, or no? Is that possible? Sorry, putting everybody in the spot here. If you could throw up the website onto the blog, that'd be great. If not, that's okay. We can post it later. Okay, go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. There's really four. There's one that's it's called Appendix D, and that's just a submission from what the district has to submit to the county office for review. The second one is a D1, which is the county office checklist. Now, this reviews various line items, and someone mentioned the other day about having somebody explain all the differences. Well, this particular sheet, anything that's plus or minus 4%, has to have an explanation on it. In addition to that, on some of those explanation lines, especially when it comes to professional development, that has to tie into the district's priorities of what they're going to do. And that's another section of the budget, which is all narrative.
And this is something board members may not be aware of.
Correct.
The extent and the level of connection, between budget, between the goals and the budget submission to the county office. Go ahead.
And then the budget has a lot of built-in, before I get into the next two, the budget has a lot of built-in safeguards. Like I said before, the Division of Finance for the Department of Ed has done a wonderful job. So you can't submit a budget with what they call a fatal edit. And the example is, let's say you want to submit a budget that's, $1 million over your tax levy. There'll be a fatal edit there, and the county office won't approve the budget. So they'll send it back and say, no, this doesn't work. And you can't even submit it for the most part. The third one is called Appendix D2. It's the Executive County, it should be the County Superintendent and Educational Specialist Review. I mean, Executive County, it should be. And this is where we look at your programs. What do you plan on doing? And this is an important document. And somebody, most likely a curriculum person, should write this and tell us what you're planning on doing curriculum-wise going forward and making sure you're meeting the learning standards. And the last one is additional spending proposal checklist. And that's just making sure it gives you the guidelines of what you can put out for a separate question. And again, there's more detail on this in the budget guidelines, which we'll put, is that up to?
Yep.
Yeah.
We put the link.
Yeah. So when you look at that link, there's a lot of information there. I would encourage you, if you have any questions, to go and look at it. Especially there's areas that explain the 2% cap, which is basically last year's tax levy plus any enrollment increase by 2%. And then you also have your adjustments. You have your healthcare adjustment. The enrollment adjustment, like I said, is already included. But there's also something called bank cap.
Yeah, any reports that you think they should be aware of that could assist them?
Yeah, this
key
is,
reports.
and most recently, like in the past week, this is the questions I've gotten.
Yeah.
So I would go into the budget guidelines and look at the enrollment adjustment and the tax levy cap.
Mhm.
Because that's the 2%. And that's separate from your rateable, your tax rate, that's separate from that. And then look at your adjustments, look at your healthcare adjustments, and some of those are coming up more and more. Okay. And bank cap.
Yeah.
Bank cap you can use. If you don't use it, you lose it.
That's right.
So,
You don't want to lose it.
and there'll be supporting documents in the budgets that you have that'll show you, this is what you have this year. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And the other information, once you start putting your budget and your appropriations particularly, then you'll start getting the adjustments coming out of what you're able to do. Now, that will increase your tax levy. So although it's a 2%,
That's right. Yeah.
you could have a 6%, you could have a 5%.
Yeah.
You could have more than 2% if you utilize your bank cap and your healthcare adjustments.
So it's that time in the program where I give you the 3 rapid fire questions.
Here we go. I'm ready.
So the first is, what book are you currently reading right now, and do you recommend it? Which is
Right now,
That's
the
a
most I'm really into the budget guidelines. I'm on page 212. I don't read for enjoyment.
really.
No. Now my wife does. She'll read constantly, but I read for learning. I love, like I said earlier, I love just doing all the research, reading educational articles, reading budgets,
And
and
you're a data person.
I
You
love
the
this stuff.
data.
I mean,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
this is great,
Yeah,
and
okay.
I enjoyed this.
All right. What about a quote that you live by? A quote that you live by.
Well, as you know, my quote would be, "A day without laughter is a day wasted," and that's a quote by Charlie Chaplin. I'll give you a little
I
side
can see
note.
that's very fitting,
We were
knowing you.
planning my fraternity reunion years ago.
How did that one go?
Oh, that one went well.
Oh, yeah?
But I called one of my fraternity brothers, who unfortunately was very, very ill. But the first question he asked me, he said, "Charlie, I got to go. I have to go to the doctor's." He said, "But are you still smiling?" And this was back from 1975. So I said, "The smile hasn't left my face in all these years."
Wow. Yeah. And I can test, since, knowing you, that you always certainly smile. So, and you make others around you smile as well, which I love. So, what about a person who has served as an inspiration to you? Could be a mentor, could be, someone who's living or not.
Well, I really have two.
Oh, okay.
You know,
We'll let
I
you
have-
bifurcate your answer then.
Huh?
We'll let you bifurcate your answer.
Okay.
Okay.
My mentor, really, every place I've been, it's been a mentor. I've been in the casino industry, someone's been my mentor. I started in a school district, somebody's been my mentor. I'm here, you're my mentor. So every place I've been, I've had a mentor. But I think the one that helped me out most was my college baseball coach. I had a very bad at-bat one time, and he told me to start running right after the game. So I started running. And then he pulled me aside and said, "Listen," he said, "if you're not going to have fun, get off the field.
Wow.
You're out here to enjoy yourself. If you're not going to enjoy yourself, don't play." So I've taken that into a lot of, just into a daily life, just if I'm not going to have fun. But I think the best one would be, the inspiration would have to be Cindy, my wife, Cindy.
Yeah.
For all these years, she's let me do what I want. Go ahead, be happy, do this, do that, whatever you want. Sounds good to me. So
You've married up.
I married up.
Yes, you did.
She married down. I asked her one time, I said, "Cindy, I don't know why you didn't leave me after the first." 45 years later, we're still together. But that would certainly be my inspiration.
Well, thank you for sharing all of your passion, your inspiration, your insight into budget development and all things considered in the finance umbrella. We thank all of you for tuning in today.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. We hope that you join us next time. It should be on the slide, but our next podcast is March 20th. So you can spend your lunch and our lunch, I guess. We're both there with us for that podcast. So we're excited to bring you another program for you to call in and ask questions. But thank you so much for your time today. And that's it. Any parting words?
enjoy the budget season.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.